All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and Happy New Year. Welcome to the first West Coast Jazz Hour of 2021. And as we've mentioned before in a promo video, if you've seen it, from now on, we're going to do two shows a month with two guests, or maybe one show with a guest and a tribute show. But we'll keep you guys up to date. But today we have a very special guest joining us for our first episode of 2021. He's an amazing piano player who has played with the likes of Zoot Sims, Shelly Manne, Gerald Wilson, Sarah Vaughn, Slight Hampton, Kenny Burrell, and he also has his own projects, multiple trio recordings that he has made over his career. And a solo record that he just recently released. And he also has several projects with his wife and flautist, Holly Hoffman. And today we are welcoming Mike Wofford to the show. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, we have my co-host, Josh Nelson, as always. Happy New Year to you too, buddy.
Happy New Year. Good to be back. And what a pleasure to have you with us, Mike. Looking forward to this.
Thank you so much, Josh.
I'm
a huge fan of yours.
Oh.
And I loved you playing ever since the first time I heard you.
Oh. Okay, I can die happy now. Mike Wofford is.
Yeah.
And thank you. That means a lot, and you're a huge inspiration to me. And I've loved your music and still learning about your music and checking it out. You have such an amazing discography that we'll just scratch the surface of, I think, a little bit today with Kevin. So looking forward to it. Yeah.
So, Mike, where we usually start is we want to have a little bit of background information about you. So Josh has whispered, figuratively speaking, in my ear that you're from San Antonio, Texas. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was born there.
How did you basically end up in LA? Because you lived in LA for quite a while, and now you're living in San Diego. So can you explain basically like when and why you moved to LA, and how you basically got started in music, like how you started to play professionally, but also how you started to play in the LA jazz scene when you moved over there?
Yeah, well, I was born in San Antonio, and then my family, we lived in Dallas briefly after that. But during the Second World War, we moved to San Diego, and that's really where I grew up, went all through school and everything. But and then I started going to LA to try to make jam sessions and get out and hear all the great players that were up there. That would have been in about 1950s, 55 and 56, somewhere in there. But I was still living in San Diego. I didn't go to LA to live permanently until about 1963, I guess, something like that. And then later on, I moved back to San Diego, where I am currently. But anyway, yeah, I had a wonderful time in LA, coming up with so many young, great players then, Gary Peacock and people like that I was just a novice trying to figure it out myself. But I went through all through public school in San Diego before I was old enough to move to LA.
And how did you start like playing professionally piano? Did that I guess that started already in San Diego before you moved to LA, right?
I was just, when I was still a kid, not even old enough to really supposedly be in nightclubs.
Mm-hmm.
But I was already doing some stuff in clubs, and just kind of on the job training. I never really had classical training or a serious teacher all the time I was growing up. I had one guy who was really great for about a year and a half, but other than that, I've never really had any teachers or studies. Uh, and there was no jazz in college or any of that sort of thing back in the era I'm talking about. There's so much more of that now for a young person.
Yeah.
But there wasn't much then. But anyway, I always took the piano. I played trombone a little bit in the school band in high school. But other than that, it's always been the piano. And I just kind of taught myself.
Interesting. And so, sorry, you go right ahead.
As teacher, but anyway.
So you said that you moved to LA in '63, if I remember that correctly. Yeah. So who were some of the first people basically that you started working with? Because I mean, you said, like you went out there like from 55 sort of kind of, and that you did jam sessions and all that. So when you moved there, like between 55 and 63, that you were kind of like already active in LA, that was like the heyday of, like people like Gary Peacock, who you mentioned, who was there already. Like it's the heyday of the LA jazz scene from like the 50s and the 60s. So you moved right there when it was, like in the middle of its heyday. So I'm like kind of curious, who are some of the first people who you played with at first?
Well, I jumped the gun a little bit with my chronology. When I said 63 is when I moved to LA permanently, but I actually had moved up there in 59, I guess. Briefly, I lived in Redondo Beach and practically lived at the lighthouse in Hermosa Beach. But I had a day job the whole time. I had studied drafting in high school, mechanical drawing. It was called, and way before computer drawing. And I had enough to get a day job as a what? Oh, I'm sorry, draftsman. For about 6 months, I worked there at Hughes Aircraft. I don't know if it's still there. Is it still there in Culver City? Hughes Aircraft.
I don't think
Howard
so.
Hughes, famous.
Right, sure.
Yeah. Anyway, and then, but I decided I wasn't really quite ready. I played. I just mostly went to sessions and things like that. As I said, I didn't land any music jobs. Just a day job I was doing. But one of the first people I met accidentally was Gary Peacock, who I mentioned earlier. He just happened to be. He was a friend of a friend that I worked with at Hughes Aircraft, as I remember, and he was playing he had kind of a little jam job, I think maybe Sundays or something like that, at a club, I think called the Red. I'm drawing a blank now, it's been so long, but it was in the Culver City area. And Gary was playing there with some other guys, and I sat in a few times. But I didn't really, I already knew some of the guys, even when I was still living in San Diego, by going to the lighthouse so much. As I said earlier, we used to practically live at the lighthouse whenever we could. When I say we, there were some wonderful, wonderful local players in San Diego who, some of whom went on to pretty great careers. John Guerin, if you're familiar with Johnny Guerin.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
One of the great drummers
Sure
ever.
is.
And wonderful guys. And we were all about the same age. And another guy who didn't go on to make a real name for himself, he died very young, but Don Sleep was his name, and he was a great trumpet player, wonderful trumpet player. And he did a little recording in New York before he died, but he died very young. So those are the guys I was kind of running with. That we would. I had the car. They weren't old enough to have a driver's license yet. So we would drive up from San Diego to the lighthouse, especially on the Sundays. The Sunday was an all-day session. I don't know how the band did it. I don't know how the guys like Conti and Bud Shank and all those guys did it. It was like about a 12-hour day for them.
Wow.
All afternoon and take a dinner break and
Mm-hmm.
another 4 or 5 hours that night. And that was on Sundays. Then the other nights of the week, it was just a regular, 9 to midnight gig for the guys. But it was Shorty Rogers and Frank Rosalino, the bonus ever, and Bud Shank, all the major guys at that time on the West Coast scene. And so for me, that was a great learning experience, just being there to listen. And then Howard Rumsey, who was the band leader and ran the club basically. He didn't own that club, but he ran it. He managed it, and he actually somehow or another I guess I had approached him, told him I was a pianist, and he asked me to sit in, so I got to sit in with those guys who was way over my head. I had no business being there, but I guess I got through it okay. But that was my introduction, excuse me, to all those great players in LA at that time. Just the mere thing of sitting in with Howard Rumsey's band every now and then.
Yeah,
great, wonderful time, unbelievable. The club is still there. The Lighthouse is still there, and I think they still have maybe one day a week or something.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, you've mentioned Bud Shank and Shorty Rogers, and you went along to play with those two guys, like with Bud Shank also pretty extensively, right?
I did later on after I had moved to LA in the early 60s. One of the first guys that I called when I got there, because I had gotten his information, Bud's information, and I remember calling him and saying, I was in town, and I gave him my new address and phone number. And he very shortly called me to work with him. I think the first thing we did was at Shelly's Manhole. I think it was Thursday nights we did. And Bill Goodwin, the great drummer, Bill Goodwin.
Oh, Bill, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's been in the East for years, but he was an LA drummer originally. And Gary Peacock was on that job a lot of the time. Anyway, yeah. So Bud, I really owe a lot to. He was just great. Because by that time, I had gotten to be an acceptable professional player. I mean, I wasn't just a kid sitting in anymore. But I still had a long way to go. But apparently he heard enough that he would take a chance on me, because he could have had any number of guys, Pete Jolly and all the great piano players in LA.
Yeah.
Carl Perkins, I mean, I loved him. Has he come up on your radar at all, Carl Perkins?
That's not somebody we've talked about on this show a lot. I'm a fan, but we'll have to pay homage to him. He was kind of an unsung hero. Yeah, beautiful cat. Mm-hmm.
I never saw him. Everybody told me that had seen him a lot around playing in town. He used to hit bass notes with his elbow, his left elbow, sometimes.
Hasn't Carl Perkins done the California concerts with Max Roach and Clifford Brown? Probably. There's like this there's this recording from like 55 or 56. Max Roach and Clifford Brown quintet, and I think Carl Perkins is playing piano on that. Yeah, with a bunch of LA cats. I think Leroy Vinegar is playing bass, and then I think Bob Cooper or Bill Perkins sits in also. It's really good. It's like the famous California tour that Max and Clifford did. Mm-hmm. I think Carl Perkins is on it at the Lighthouse. I think maybe even.
I didn't get to know him at all. He was a wonderful player. I just loved him. Well, because he was already recording. I remember having an album. But Bud was the first to really hire me give me a chance to get started in LA. And then shortly thereafter, Shorty Rogers called me to do the same. And I worked with him also at Shelly's Manne, which was a brand new club then. It had only been in existence for a couple of years, I think. And so anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
awesome. Josh, should we go to the first piece of music that we want to show?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to hear some of your history, Mike.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
live not too far from, I just live pretty much down the street from the old Shelly's Manhole, and that location where it used to be. And every time I drive by, I just think of all the recordings I've listened to from there, or just seeing like people coming in.
Yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful venue.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry you're not old enough to have had the opportunity.
Yeah.
They tried a second version of it later down in the another area of Hollywood, but it didn't work. It was just didn't have the same feeling and the same
right
character as the original Manhole.
Right.
And it lasted, I think, maybe a year or something like that, and they gave up on it.
Oh wow, short.
But the original Manhole was priceless. It was just a wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Place. And I heard so many great people there, Miles and
wow,
Bill Evans Trio, and just go on and on.
Oh.
So that was an experience and a great learning experience, just being able to listen to those people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, well, the LA scene right now, you and Holly might have heard, is reeling from one of our great jazz clubs closing in downtown LA. Blue Whale just closed its doors.
Oh, I read about that in the paper.
Yeah, and we're all sad, and it kind of, in some way, harkens back in my head to maybe the day that Shelly's Manhole closed, and probably all the broken hearts that, we're sad to see that go.
Oh,
yeah.
It was truly a very special place.
Well, I would love to, if we're okay with this, Mike, with your blessing, play a little track from your very first album as a leader in 1967, Strawberry Wine.
This is with John Guerin.
With John.
And a wonderful bassist who got out of the business.
Oh, I was going to ask about him, yeah.
John Doling, he was a wonderful, wonderful bassist and composer. And he got disillusioned with things in LA and got into a day job and never went back to playing.
Wow. We lost one. Well, he sure sounds good on this record with you, and I think all our listeners will probably, viewers here, will agree when they hear just the fire in this trio. And beautiful Johnny Guerin, who I got a chance to play with a little bit with Mike Barone's big band before Johnny died. Yeah, and I just loved him. I mean, we've talked about him on the show before.
He was a very special, just one of the most creative drummers,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll hear it on this track. I mean, I was actually having trouble picking a selection, but Holly shared one of her favorites, and I think I'll play that one. I Know Your Heart. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Great. So we're interviewing the great pianist Mike Wofford, for all those just joining on the West Coast Jazz Hour, and this is I Know Your Heart from his 1967 debut record as a leader, Strawberry Wine. Wow.
I was a busy boy.
Excuse the profanity, but that was some hip shit.
Yeah.
Oh,
Holy
man.
shit.
Busy, but so
That was a
lyrical.
great. Oh, it was from a show. I can't think of the name of it offhand. I think it ran about 2 weeks on Broadway.
Oh yeah, I was looking
Ah,
up the details. Written by H. Martin and T. Gray. So we need
Yeah.
to.
And did you get the name of the
No, I
show?
got to look into
Uh,
that more.
yeah, well, it's long gone. But
Uh huh.
anyway, it had just come out when I recorded it. It turned out to be a good choice, I think. It's a great song.
Wow. Just so virtuosic and
I know your
lyrical.
heart by heart.
Yeah. And I just, yeah, you're just playing your took us off, and
yeah.
hearing
And then
John,
some.
yeah, and then some, and hearing John just simmer with you, and I love that Johnny never goes to sticks.
Yeah.
He keeps
Yeah,
it.
he does on some other stuff, which is great, but on that particular one, he didn't.
I love it. It just keeps it at this nice simmer the whole time, and you
Yeah,
never,
well,
yeah,
that's a
I
good way
just,
to put it. I hadn't thought of that, but that's true.
yeah, and then John Doling sounds almost. It's almost like you're channeling, he's Scotty LaFaro, or
Mhm.
he's kind of
Well, he
approach.
worshipped Scotty.
I
Yeah,
can
I
hear
knew him
it.
actually somewhat. He had been around him in New York a little bit.
Wow.
He just, he really, of course, at that time, Scott was so brand new, a phenomenon,
Right.
and everybody was just completely blown away with him.
Mm.
And,
Wow.
but yeah, John, you can hear a little bit of Scotty in John's play.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You're just magnificent. So that was 1967.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
You weren't even 30 yet.
Oh, yeah.
Playing your butt off.
You know,
Yeah, man, just so great. Thank you for the
I'm glad you
music.
found that one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I thought we kind of start with the beginning with your first album. Yeah.
Yeah, I get a very, very big Bill Evans impression, especially like when the trio with Larry Bunker. But I think that was kind of like around the same time when when he brought out that record. Was it like Trio 64 or something like that that it was with Bunker?
Yeah,
Check his
that was
reels.
done
Yeah.
live at the club at the Manhole.
Ah,
Right.
I think
that's right.
that's the
Yeah.
one we're talking about.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the one.
I was there. I was there some of those nights
Wow.
in the crowd, and it was just amazing. Bill just blew everybody's mind when he came on the scene, particularly piano players, but everybody, horn players and everybody else. It was just such a fresh, completely new and different approach to the playing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can hear other players in him that came earlier, of course, naturally. Nat Cole. He always talked about Nat Cole as one of his most favorite pianists.
Mm.
And everybody agrees. Nat never got the recognition as a pianist because the public knew he
True.
was this wonderful voice and singer.
Yes.
But Oscar Peterson always attributes Nat Cole as his major influence. After Art Tatum. Art Tatum was everybody's first.
Yeah.
So I guess this applies to you as well, what you're just saying.
Oh yeah, as far as Nat Cole,
Yeah.
just generally speaking, yeah. Oh yeah, I was aware of him as a kid, but again, mostly from his vocal recordings. His instrumental stuff there wasn't much at that time available that he had recorded. It was only that more of his stuff started coming out as a pianist and not just as a vocalist. They had been recorded earlier. They were actually, most of the stuff that's available instrumentally on Nat Cole was recorded before he started making any really vocal recordings. Right. But they weren't, it was only later that they really came out. A lot of them were never released, or they were released in very small batches and didn't really reach a huge public,
Mm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Nat Cole was a bad boy.
Sure was.
He had a touch that almost nobody ever replicated.
Yeah.
you can hear it in Oscar's solo ballad play, which in his blowing kind of recordings. But when you hear him playing ballads, you can really hear that call.
Absolutely, I agree. Kevin, you want to take it away with the next play?
Yeah, I was actually like kind of curious about this this track that we just heard, because it's like so like the rhythm section is like so nicely like how do you say, like interwoven, like it's so nicely weaved together, but it's like super rhythmical, like it goes to like all different kinds of places. So I was kind of like wondering like how you went about that, like creating such I mean, your harmonical palette is incredible, but you know, like you go to like so many like different, you know, like ways rhythmically wise. Like can you maybe like tell us a little bit like how you went about your, you know, like your rhythmic approach?
I I feel like in looking back that I always, first of all, I always loved comping. They call comping in a rhythm section, playing with horn players and guitar players and whoever, and with singers as well. And I always, even as a young player, just coming up and just, you know, getting my feet wet, I remember I was fascinated with how different piano players did that. It just means accompanying, basically. I
Yeah.
assume comping probably comes from accompanying. I don't know. But there was a drummer, can't think of his name right now, in LA that I played with a lot, and his nickname for me was Comper. So it's always been, so anyway, my point is that I think the idea of really enjoying comping and accompanying means being more concerned with rhythm and rhythmic figures than just chords and substitutions of chords and all of that sort of thing, which is a whole different animal. You know, where it's harmonic content and how pianists massage different chords in different ways. But the rhythmic side of it, which is more like just the way a drummer would think, you know, at least that's, I think, I mean, I didn't have this all going through my mind at that age at the time, but as I've grown older, I realized that I always seemed to feel as much like a drummer as a piano player when I was playing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And plus, I had played with such great drummers like Johnny Cash. So I was inspired early on by. A lot of pianists can sound wonderful and play beautifully, but they don't particularly enjoy playing, comping for other people necessarily. They'd rather do their own thing, which is great. But I always really also enjoyed what I could contribute to a band, not just as a soloist, but as a rhythmic element. You know?
Yeah. Right.
I completely agree, and I have the same approach often. I often don't want to solo. I'd rather comp and contribute those ideas to the ensemble, because it's such an interesting thing to me. People, oh, you want to solo? No, I'll just just comp along. Yeah.
But even then, when you are playing solos of your own, there's probably a lot more rhythm in them than you might hear in other players who are maybe very accomplished, but they just don't play that way. You know?
Yeah, right. Good point.
One of my favorite pianists of all time, I meant to mention him earlier when we were reminiscing about the Lighthouse. The house pianist with Howard Rumsey's band, they're the Lighthouse All Stars. When I was going, was Sonny Clark.
Oh,
Sonny Clark,
the great.
He was unbelievable, and I think he had a tremendous impression, or made a tremendous impression on me. He was a very sweet guy, kind of a quiet guy. I tried to talk to him now and then. I mean, I'm talking about I was still in high school or just out. And he was a few years older, not much. He was probably 5 or 6 years older. But I asked him one time something about what he recommended that I was a pianist, and what would he recommend? He said, just keep playing. Pretty much. All right. Anyway, then he moved back to New York. He was from Pittsburgh originally, but he had come to the coast and worked more in California and in LA, and I think maybe San Francisco as well, than he had ever worked back east. But yeah, after he left the Lighthouse All Stars, he went back to New York and became just almost overnight everybody's first call piano player.
Yeah.
Jazz world. Everybody loved Sonny. He just had a thing.
Sure did.
Sure did. Great feel, and again, his solos had a rhythmic, comping kind of vibe to them, and rather than a lot of filigree, what have you.
Right.
And he only became well known later. He was not well known at all when he was still in LA, I don't think, except by the cats, the guys, but certainly not the general public. And he died much too young, I think, in his late 30s, maybe mid 30s.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I did want to mention Sonny Clark.
Sure.
Of course.
He's a major voice in West Coast. He would have been considered a West Coast player in those days.
Right. I didn't even know that. That's some new info to me, that Sonny Clark was actually over here for a while.
Oh yeah. I don't know how much he did anyway. He worked at the Lighthouse for, I think, about maybe a year or something like that with Howard. Wow. I don't know what he had done before that, or I just know he went to New York after that immediately.
The Sonny Clark trio record with Paul Chambers and Philly Joe Jones is so burning. That's one of my staples, and I actually teach about comping from that album because I love his comping so much.
There you go.
I mean, his solo playing, of course, but there's something about the way he accompanies in that, with that trio on those tunes, that's like magic to me.
Yeah. Well, that's good advice from you.
Oh. Well, thank you, sir. Wow.
That was my point too, as far as my playing. I know I absorbed just kind of through osmosis or something, that whole approach to comping and keeping things rhythmically interesting, not just being there, but really making things happen. That's a great feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to, but when not to. Well,
right.
Right. And exactly what you're saying, really trying to make things happen. That, super simple, but it's like, yes, that's the truth right there. I want to go to the next piece of music, but I wanted to mention real quick, Mike, that Pat Senator was watching from Rome. And he said, like, it's 2 a.m. in Rome, and I'm in bed. I won't be able to stay awake much longer, but it was great hearing you and reminiscing. So he wanted to say hi. Yeah.
I wonder if Italy. He's moved to Italy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that would account for the time change.
Yeah.
Pat was a wonderful player, and I assume he still is.
Yes, he is.
He used to play a lot around town, clubs and what have you.
Yeah, and Jay Lenhart is actually also watching, and he mentioned John Bunch could comp.
John was, he could, and he was just a great all-around player, John. And he could make he could slide from very convincing trad piano, kind of pre-modern jazz piano, and he could go right into the hippest bebop. I'm talking about John in the past. I think he has left us, I believe. But he was great at that. He could go through decades of jazz piano.
Wow.
And that's why it made him a wonderful accompanist for so many people.
Right, right. Well, we're going to listen, with your permission, actually, to you as a sideman, actually, as a comper, if you will. And because Josh actually showed me, or your wife Holly also mentioned this recording of Shelly Manne's quintet with you. You've had a long relationship with Shelly Manne, who's one of the greatest drummers who ever lived. And let me see if I can find out. It's a record from 1967 with Shelly Conticondoli on trumpet, Frank Strozier on alto and flute, Monty Budwig on bass, and then, of course, Mike Wofford on piano. And I thought it was cool, or actually it was Josh's idea, to play a song from that record that's called Perk Up, and it's one of your compositions, actually, Mike. We're going to take a listen to Bleep, and I need to share my sound for that first.
I was having a Thelonious Monk moment, I think.
I love this melody, and thanks for playing it, Kevin. There's so many good tunes on this record.
Yeah, this record is amazing.
The Jimmy Rolls tunes and but Bleep, talk about comping and how you keep the melody and the rhythm of the melody behind the solos in such a slick way. I mean, I think everyone's going to really love this track.
Yeah, let's take a listen to Bleep of Mike Wofford with Shelly Manne.
little tribute to Monk.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that in a long time. It's fun to hear that again.
Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to play it.
Yeah. I feel like playing also now.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So you actually had a long
You heard the great Frank Strozier. What a
Yeah.
wonderful player he was. Man, really, really great.
Burning.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was actually like kind of curious about your relationship with Shelly, because he's one of the all-time greats, and you've worked extensively actually with him. So I was kind of curious about your relationship with Shelly, if you can talk a little bit about that, and what made him such a good drummer from your perspective, basically.
Yeah, well, I don't know where to begin with Shelly. He was just one of those special guys you could ever play with or be around. You know, just a wonderful, wonderful human being and great, great player. He had been really involved in the New York scene before, when he was young, before he came to the West Coast. And then he very quickly became the most sought after drummer in LA on the West Coast. But he had already been pretty well established in New York before he even came out here. But just a wonderful guy to work for and to learn from, and just very, very supportive and a great human being, Shelly Manne. Everybody loves Shelly. I've never, ever heard anyone in the business or otherwise ever have a negative thought about Shelly Manne, you know, when they're talking about those times.
Yeah, I'm sure you've played plenty of times with him at the Manhole, I guess, because he had like the residency over there. I don't remember exactly like how it worked, but then there was like an act, and then there was like a late set with Shelly's band, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, well, that was Shelly Manne and his men in those days. Shelly Manne and his men. He worked, I think the guys worked Friday and Saturday night opposite the mainliner, whoever, you know, it might have been Miles sometimes, it might have been Zoot, any number of different people that was the headliner. But and then his band would alternate with him. Russ Freeman was the pianist, the longtime pianist with Shelly, a wonderful pianist, a wonderful composer, wrote so many great tunes and songs. But he decided he was going to leave and go to an accompanying job that would really pay him the kind of money that he wasn't making just gigging at the Manhole. And so he left, and Shelly called me and asked me if I wanted to replace Russ, and I of course jumped at it immediately.
Yeah.
I think it was Mitzi Gaynor was the singer that made Russ an offer he couldn't refuse. He made great money with her, and he was a wonderful accompanist, just a great player all around. So that's how I got started with Shelly. I had actually met him when I was still in high school. He was playing in San Diego, where of course I was living at the time, and I actually met him and said hi or something briefly, but that was my only connection with him until I finally moved to LA myself. And he, I can't remember when well, I guess joining his band at the Manhole was the first gig he actually hired me for. And then after that, we did everything. We went to Japan and all over Europe and all over the U.S. You know, it was usually Conti, Condoli, just a wonderful, one of my most favorite trumpet players ever.
Absolutely.
And not generally known by most of the listening public, really, unless you were really paying attention. but he was remarkable. His time and ideas and feeling, and just a wonderful guy to work with. So he was the regular trumpet player, and different sax players came and went with the band, and but then and then from that I started working at the Manhole, backing other acts that were coming in, other players and singers. I used to work with Ruth Price there. I think it was Monday nights was vocal night, and I got to know Ruth there and back her. And well, I worked. First time I got to play with Zoot Sims was at the Manhole. I think his pianist that he had wanted to have initially was Jimmy Rolls, probably, and they had a commitment or something that conflicted with the Manhole. So somehow I got the gig. I don't remember how that happened. That was, playing with Zoot Sims. I mean, that was as good as that gets. And so anyway, there was just a whole lot of stuff that came to me inadvertently or directly through having been involved with the Manhole, the Shelly's place. Because not only playing with Shelly, but also with all the groups that came through if they needed a pianist.
Right. So I can imagine that you developed a lot of relations actually from that gig, that you were accompanying people at the Manhole, and then like those people would call you back to do whatever, like recording sessions or gigs or whatever, something like that.
Yeah, Irene Krall.
Oh, beautiful! Oh my God.
Irene Krall was
magnificent,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
A singer, marvelous.
Yeah, and I saw in your discography that you recorded an album with Zoot. I'm trying to look it up, but I think it was with Nick Ceroli on drums, and I can't remember who the bass player was.
It's the music of Johnny Mandel. I don't remember
exactly.
Oh,
bass player was probably the Usual Suspects. I can't think offhand who that might have been. But it was Nick Ceroli.
Yeah, here I got it. Quietly there, and let me see it's Berghofer. Yeah.
Oh, Chuck.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I got to hear that record.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Man, you've worked with like my most favorite West Coast drummers, man. Like I have something of a Larry Bunker recording that you're on lined up, but like Ceroli and Shelly and John Guerin, it's all of the cats. Like, ooh, I'm all excited.
By the way, flashing back as far as drummers, the one who called me Comper was Jake Hanna.
Oh, Jake.
Oh, okay.
And anyway, that's
fantastic.
One of the other staple guys from the West Coast jazz scene. Josh, you want to take it?
Sure. What got me, the courage to ask you to talk with us today, Mike, was putting on this Shelly Manne record.
Oh yeah.
Which is fire. I mean, everyone's playing great, and I love that Shelly had the trio play a little bit, and then Lee Konitz comes on. You have a amazing voice on Softly as in a Morning Sunrise. I did a Facebook show live recently, and I led off with that track, and it's
is that right?
Just so good.
We did that outside of Paris.
Yeah.
A little city near Paris in France.
Oh wow.
And I remember I was really sick with the flu.
Oh.
Just praying I could get through it.
Well, you certainly did that.
This
is a friend. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. But anyway, the trio played the first half, and then Lee came out the second half. Lee Konitz was wonderful to play with.
Yeah. For all those joining us, I highly recommend this Shelly Manne Quartet featuring Lee Konitz, the French concert, and it's 1977. And Mike, you're playing so great, And not only were you playing great back then, you're playing so good now, and I would like to share something from more recently. This is from your solo record. It's Personal, which I just love. I've been checking out. I hadn't got it, but Holly Hoffman had said you gotta hear that. It's really good. So I thought I'd play Cole Porter. How do you feel about me playing that tune? Is that okay? Cole Porter?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. This is such a cool tune. I'd love for you to talk about it a little bit after we listen to it. We might not get through the whole thing. I might play a couple minutes into it if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So this is Mike Wofford, our special guest, and from his record, It's Personal. This is your composition, I assume, Cole Porter?
Yes.
Oh, great.
It's a little play on, there's a little fragment that's a little tribute.
Cool. Okay, here we go. Mike. That's just incredible. What a great tune.
Did you got I Get No Kick from Champagne, I guess. Out of
I was,
Yeah.
yeah. Da, 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 dee.
that. The title.
Yeah. Man, I just don't know what to say. You're just playing your butt off.
Yeah.
And your sense of time. I have actually a student of mine from a long time ago. Hey, Kevin Bernstein, a very fine pianist. He says
Oh,
left hand tenths, baby, is what he says. And I'm just curious, any advice, generally speaking, for young pianists as they get into this? I was watching an interview of yours. It was short, where you were talking about playing a little bit with John Lennon and being near Michael Jackson. And at the end, you mentioned just listening to music. Whether it's before transcribing or anything else. But I'm curious if there's something young, aspiring pianists who didn't have the luxury of going to Shelly's Manhole, or, you know, being in that space that you had, or that zone. Anything you might share wisdom wise, something general even, or what to listen for? What do you like to practice? Just a little bit of some Woffordisms,
Mm.
if you have any you'd like to share.
well, I'm terrible about practicing, so
Me too. After hearing that,
I
I
used to
need to
work.
hit it.
I used to work with a tenor player that would say, "I felt like practicing when I woke up this morning, but I'm okay now." Kind of my well, everybody comes at it from different ways, so a lot
Mhm.
of it has to do, with your own personality and adventurousness. And, that's a tough question.
Maybe it's too general.
Well, you know, you you can come up with kind of the old warhorse answers
Right.
that, but it's different. The personality has a tremendous amount to do with it. It
Right.
certainly does. Some young people, I've known young pianists, love nothing more than practicing. They'll play 12 hours a day. Benny Green's like that.
Mm.
And I've always wished I had that gene. But so for a person like that, uh, what can you say? Just keep practicing
Right.
all you can, but also listening to the greats, not to copy them, but to get an overall uh, feel and karma about how this music happens and is supposed to happen. Does that make sense? It's
Absolutely.
there's a lot more there's a lot more to playing jazz well than playing your instrument well.
Mm.
It's important too, of course, but it's it's somewhat like classical piano in some ways. Classical piano can demand a lot of emotion and a lot
Hmm.
of commitment and so on. It's not just peculiar to jazz, but I think jazz, more than any other musical form, uh, really requires a, a commitment to, well, first of all, I always encourage young players to be themselves. Don't uh, don't worry about what other people feel you should play or how you should play with. Be yourself. Take chances. Investigate different things. Uh, Playing wise, try different things, and if it doesn't work, then okay, move on to something else. But uh, then it can happen for. Now, we're speaking primarily pianists, I guess. Maybe this would apply to everybody.
Sure.
But I'm thinking mostly of piano. It's really important to try to develop something of your own, something that's you, and not just an imitation of whoever your heroes are. And all young players go through that. They're naturally going to want to copy whoever it may be.
Right.
But at some point, you have to try to shed that and figure out who you are and what makes you special. You know. And for some people, it can mean a lot of fantastic technique, but like an Oscar Peterson would say. But it also, if you've listened to pianists like Jimmy Rolls, which not too well known in New York, but about here, most musicians would know who that is.
Yeah.
If they've been following the music at all. Jimmy Rolls, minimum technique and a maximum of feeling and thought and mind in the playing. They're two different animals altogether. Oscar can play ballads beautifully. He's a beautiful ballad player. But he has some failings, I think, or did have, as far as a lot of times in his trio situations. It's just too much. You know, and technically. So I would discourage that. Some people, if you have natural technique and you just can do a million things at the keyboard, well, that's fine. But just make sure you can channel it into something that means something, and that someone else is going to really want to hear and connect with, and not just flash that you want to exhibit. You know, Thelonious Monk had a lot more technique, for instance, I think, than he's given credit for. So many people would have, I remember, said back in the day, well, he's okay, you know, he doesn't really play the piano very well, or he's no Oscar Peterson. But Monk is perfect. He's instantly identifiable. If you hear 2 bars on a recording, if you know anything about this music, you know who that is. And he created a way of playing that is uniquely him and nobody else. Maybe a little Duke Ellington, that would be probably the closest influence I could think of. But, and he also liked the stride players back in the old days, you know. But anyway, that's just someone like a Monk, or you can tell Bill Evans, you can tell in a bar and a half if you turn on the radio or happen to have a recording available. You can tell Bill Evans immediately, his sound and his harmonic sense, and those are the things to strive for. That individual, the individuality in becoming a really strong, great player. As far as I don't really have a whole lot of magic tricks as far as piano is concerned, as far as what to practice or how to technically what to work on.
Right.
I think everybody has to find it for themselves. There's nothing wrong at all with getting a good classical teacher and studying some serious classical piano, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But ultimately in jazz, you still have to find your own thing. You're not just playing someone else's music, you're playing your.
Well, beautiful words.
That
wisdom.
Kind of sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That was a lifetime of knowledge that we don't take lightly, Kevin and I. I mean, thank you for sharing those beautiful sentiments. Thank you.
Jimmy Rolls is the one I love to talk about, Jimmy, because he was amazing. And
yes,
maybe you guys can do he's not here, unfortunately.
Well, we do these tribute shows, and we did Frank Capp. We did it Andre Previn, and actually Jimmy would be great too, because he's one of my favorites, just for exact reasons that you just talked about. just his understated technique, but also just maximum emotion and understanding of the space and what every moment needs. I'm a huge Jimmy Rolls fan.
Yeah, and one of the funniest guys ever, besides.
Yeah.
Great sense of humor, and his cartoons, if you've seen them, amazing.
Yeah, what an artist.
Yeah, he was.
Wow.
Well, you obviously have been paying attention to Jimmy Rolls.
I'm just trying to keep up with all this great music. Kevin had the idea for this show at the beginning of the pandemic, and it has just been amazing to get to talk with folks like you and continue to learn and get better. Just, what does Jack Sheldon say? Just keep trying to get good. You know?
Yeah.
Kevin, you want to take it?
Yeah, and my thanks to you as well, Mike, for that really great statement that you made. There's so much wisdom in there, and definitely also applicable to, you know, like I play drums, so, you know, like I definitely can feel what you're saying about, you know, like the pianist, but it's definitely applicable on the drums. So thank you for that. I would like to go to actually to a live recording that you actually did, which is coming actually from the Manhole. And I was listening to this in the weekend, and the recording just blew me away because you guys are playing with so much fire. And it's Larry Bunker's quartet live at the Manhole, featuring a young Gary Burton. And it's you on piano and Bobby West on bass, and then Bunker is playing drums. And I'm blanking on the year when this is exactly recorded. Do you know that, Mike, off the top of your head?
About, I want to say about 62 or 3, something like that. 1962.
I mean, Gary is just on fire, and the way how well, now that I know, you know, your whole concept about comping and making, you know, like making things happen, that I'm putting 2 and 2 together, because your comping under Gary's soloing is unbelievable, and Gary's soloing is unbelievable. The whole band sounds really, really great. And I wanted to play this track. It's the final track on the album, and it's a standard, and it's called Israel, with the Larry. What was that? Sorry.
Johnny Carisi was the composer. Yeah.
Exactly, Johnny Carisi. Thank you.
By the way, going back to the date of it, what year was JFK assassinated? That 64?
63.
That's 63. Well, that was the same year we made that album.
Oh.
So I guess I was pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah, Larry had discovered Gary. Somebody had heard him. I think Gary was playing maybe with George Shearing, and he was just out of high school, I think, and if maybe still in the last year of high school. But Larry somehow had heard him or something, and really wanted to make an album with him, which we did live at the club. And a wonderful bass player, Bob West. So anyway,
yeah. I would love to show the folks at home also a little insight on this recording. You guys play beautiful tunes. You guys start with "I Love You," which is super burning. "All the Things You Are," "My Foolish Heart" is on it. A couple tunes that I think might be originals: "Waltz for a Lovely Wife" and "Panther Paws," which is also super burning. But I'm going to play Israel of the Larry Bunker Quartet, featuring Gary Burton and also Mike Wofford on piano. So here we go. cut it off there because it's a 7-minute track.
Yeah.
So, Mike, the impression that I'm getting basically, like all of these great drummers are calling you like to play with them. Shelly's band, Larry Bunker, John Guerin, we just heard in your own trio. Is there like is the connection between piano and drums as comping instruments? How important is that relationship for you? Because the way, like how I look at it basically is that my left hand, which I'm playing the snare drum with, is like kind of linked with your left hand or a left hand of a piano player. So I'm kind of curious to hear about how you look at the connection between drums and piano as like comping instruments, and how important that connection is for you.
Yeah, there's definitely a strong connection. I think you're right, Kevin. And you talk about comping on the drums, really, especially on the snare.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, on a drum set, basically a good drummer is doing that very thing. Back in swing and in earlier periods of jazz, drumming was pretty much just keeping the beat and nothing too nothing too what's the word I'm looking for? Well,
not too many bells and whistles, basically.
Yeah, I'm striking out on that. But anyway, later on with bebop, especially, and which Shelly, of course, was a big part of, Stan Levy, great drummer.
Absolutely.
One of the, some people say the greatest of all the bebop drummers, really.
Yeah.
And he was in New York and then came to LA. So it was the other way around for him. And then he eventually got out of music and became a photographer. But everybody talks about Stan Levy and what an important figure he was in West Coast jazz. And it had been even before that in New York, in playing with Bird and Diz and those guys on 57th Street. So anyway, but drums, where were we? I digressed.
The connection between piano and drums for you.
Yeah. Well, it's I've always, I think, been really interested in interacting in when you're in a jazz situation where you can really play what you want to play and you're not just reading an arrangement or something. To interact with the drummer and try to be interesting for the drummer, feeding the drummer interesting things maybe sometimes, and vice versa. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right, dead on. There's a real connection, I think, in any jazz group between piano and drums. There should be between everybody, of course, but I mean, this is kind of a special thing, as you alluded to. And of course, for the piano, it's also interacting with the bass player and listening and making sure that what the two of you are doing fits,
Right. Yeah. It feels with it's sort of like what is coming through these recordings that we've listened to is like you really have a huge set of ears, because you're like filling in the gaps, basically, like the way how we just heard, like that you're feeding Gary basically with ideas that it goes to a different place, and then Gary does something else with it and it goes to another place. But also like how from that previous recording, how Bunker is responding to you, and Bunker was an amazing vibraphone player too, so he had that harmonic thing going on as well. So, but that's just a really interesting thing that I've heard that's like so present in your own playing. Like there's such a big presence of the connection that you make with the drums. Also with that trio recording you made a couple of years ago with Peter Washington and Victor Lewis, jazz like live at the Athenaeum. I was blown out of my mind because Victor just goes wherever and you go with him or, you know, like around him. This was just an incredible recording.
Victor's amazing, really amazing. You know, that's a wonderful recording. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, yeah. And also the sound, the sound quality of the recording is just incredible. That's a live recording too, right?
It wasn't supposed to be a recording. Our record producer at the time in Denver was out visiting for that concert, and Tom Burns, and he thought at the last minute, he said, "You guys mind if I just throw a what is it, Bluetooth? Is that
it was a blue microphone.
A blue microphone?" And he said, "Do you mind if I just throw it up, you know, just for laughs? We can listen to it later, maybe." And we said, "Fine." And once the concert was over, I think the next day, we heard the tape, which was completely unplanned, and the sound quality and everything was just couldn't have been better. So that was one of those unusual situations where it wasn't planned at all. And yeah, I'm very proud of that album.
Yeah, that's amazing. Josh, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I echo your sentiments, Kevin. Listening to Mike, you're comping under Gary, and just
you know, the other thing too is I'll interrupt.
Oh, sure, please.
That I mentioned earlier when we were talking. One of the things that, strangely enough, apropos of what we're talking about with comping and so on and so forth, I've always, I don't know who I first heard do it, but something must have stuck in my mind the first time I heard a pianist laying out for long periods.
Mm.
Especially, for instance, maybe if a new soloist starts, rather than jumping in and accompanying right away for that new soloist, just take your hands off the keyboard and let them play a while before you even come back in.
Right.
Or that can happen in the middle of someone's solo. If somebody's playing a trumpet solo or whatever and you're accompanying, and then when it feels right, you just play out a while and pick anything. It's called strolling. That's what the guys have always called it. And in fact, it's like if a leader wanted you to lay out, they'd say stroll. So, but anyway, I've always found that fascinating. And on one or two of the things that you've played this evening, I did that. That's what reminded me of it. I got out of the comp for a while, and then I just stopped for several choruses sometimes and just lay out.
Right.
And that's a whole different shade on things. And the soloist, if it's a saxophone player or whoever, has all the freedom in the world. They don't, you know, it becomes more their thing, really, in some ways. So I thought that was an important little sidebar to add.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you agree, Josh? I mean, I'm sure you've discovered that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I do.
The best thing you can do as a pianist is lay out and do nothing.
Lay out and do nothing. Yeah. Actually, that's a big observation I have about a lot of young players when they're learning the craft and we're listening together. I try to point out, you know, the idea of comping can be rhythmically complex or some kind of conversation, but it can also be what you're talking about, Mike, which is laying out, which is so effective when you do it well. Actually, on that bleep track from the Perk Up record, you really are spare with your comping right at the beginning, and it's very effective because it's these low voicings that are kind of ominous or something in the beginning, and then they kind of develop, and you just, it's behind Conti's solo, and you let him.
That's right. It happened a couple of times on that.
Exactly, and that's a perfect example, I think, of less is more, and just letting the soloist take us on the journey. And when it's time, naturally, you kind of orchestrate your way back in, and you do it so effortlessly. Thanks for sharing that. That's another thing I think a lot of young pianists and maybe even guitarists, instruments that comp, need to consider, you know?
It just puts a different texture on things.
Absolutely.
Now, the soloists have to be strong enough that they don't need any help, you know. Otherwise, if you're backing somebody that's a little shaky to begin with, the last thing you want to do is stop playing.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. We're going about an hour and a half. How you doing? Can we play a little bit more and talk with you?
I'm doing great. If you
Oh,
guys
good. We're just having a ball.
are sick of me, tell me.
No. Shall I play something, Kev?
Yeah, we can play one more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is something Holly recommended, a record I hadn't heard, more recent as well, but I also wanted to pick your brain a little bit about arranging, generally speaking, without getting into too much detail. And this happens to be an original composition by a guest we recently had on,
Yeah.
the great Vince Mendoza, and his composition Esperanza. And this is off the record Turn Signal. And looks like Mike's frozen. Hopefully
Yeah, for just a second.
he's
He's back.
Oh, okay, you're back. And Terrell Stafford, I believe, is on this record as well.
Right, yeah. Oh, Holly.
And Holly is playing beautifully. And then also San Diego's own, who I've had the pleasure of working with over some time now, is the great Rob Thorson on bass. And Richard Sellers on drums.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very proud of that CD too. I think we put a lot of time in, a lot of rehearsing.
Oh, yeah. Well, it sure came out beautifully, and I'm just starting to check the rest of it out. But I'll just play a portion of this piece because it's over 9 minutes. So just a little chunk. Thanks, everyone, for watching. This is our guest today, the great Mike Wofford on piano, and from their record, Mike's record, Turn Signal, with Holly Hoffman, Terrell Stafford.
Thank you, Josh and Kevin.
Thank you. Give the whole thing away. People should go buy the record and check it out. It's Turn Signal by Mike Wofford and Holly Hoffman, featuring Terrell Stafford on trumpet, Holly on flute, of course Mike on piano, and Rob Thorson on bass, and Richard Sellers on the drums, with a Vince Mendoza composition, Esperanza. And Mike, just beautiful playing. I'm just curious, what are some of your general thoughts on arranging like a tune like this, which with, coming more from a modern kind of sensibility of voicings and changes, and with this ensemble, I really appreciated the sensitivity you gave to the track, to the song, and the trading with Holly and Terrell to kind of keep the flower blossoming as the piece goes on. But any thoughts on your process? I'm asking these huge questions. Sorry about that. I just love it. Yeah.
Well, first of all, Vince is, I think it's the first recording he did of it. Maybe he's done others since then. I don't know. But that original recording he did in London.
Yeah.
Right.
Philharmonic. And you really don't, for an arranger in that, I just had to get it down on paper what he had created. I mean, it was his harmonization. It was just breathtaking on it, spine-tinglingly beautiful.
Right.
And you really didn't. Of course, that was with strings and a whole symphony.
Sure.
Sextet, but. You really didn't have to come up with anything special. I just tried to recreate what he had already written.
Right.
And then condense it down a little bit to
Sure.
a more jazz format.
Sure.
That's why we do the horns trading off and those things, which are not the original recording. But his was just breathtaking. First time I heard it, I just couldn't believe it.
I heard the clarity of the translation from his version to yours. I guess to pinpoint more, my question is the subtle little things that we'll do even without knowing them as arrangers, or solo order, or how even that alone, you taking the first solo and Richard staying on brushes, and then the trades, some of those elements that seem to naturally happen, when you're a master like you, that kind of more what I was referring to, I guess. And yeah, this tune is so great. You kind of didn't need to do a whole lot with it except get it down. But do you put a lot of thought into when you're arranging, like who's going to solo first? What's the texture happening here? Where's the energy lie? Where's the weight of the tune happening?
Yeah, well, it's really important. Who was it? I think it was one of the New Yorker writers. Whitney Balliet, I think it was. You know that name? Mm-hmm. I think he was credited with being the first to say that jazz is the sound. Jazz is the sound of surprise. Mm-hmm. I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, I think that's very, very true. That
yes.
So sweet. The element of surprise, I always try to keep in mind with arranging as much as you can. Sometimes you have to do something more commercially to maybe fit a different kind of. I'm talking about recording now.
Sure.
You may not be able to arrange something the way you might choose to, because it's not supposed to be necessarily hip jazz, just something. It could be a commercial or something.
Yeah.
Or, but for this kind of thing, it's really it's really important to think about, as you mentioned, solo order, mixing things up so that they're surprising, so that the listener says, "Oh, wait a minute, what was that?"
Mm-hmm.
I think you know you need to always keep that in the back of your mind, whether it's a very slow, just a beautiful ballad, or something really up tempo and a real bebop arrangement, whatever. It's always the idea of what can I do to make this special,
Mm.
and it can take a lot of forms.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, that's like on the cut that we just heard. The trading of the between the horns, that of course didn't occur on the original recording that Vince did in London with the symphony orchestra. But in fact, I think there was almost no soloing per se as far as improv on that particular cut. I don't think. But and yet at the same time, to want to be honest with the original piece and not just decide you're going to make it your own and do whatever you feel like. Try to keep in mind what Vince was going for, and try to impart that in a jazz situation.
Right.
I think I must have emailed him maybe about that after it came out, but I know he got back to me anyway and said he really enjoyed the version we did, and really was very appreciative of it. So that's always nice to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that, Mike.
Yeah, and we're coming too close, like to an hour and 45. Time flies when you're having fun. So
Just getting started.
yeah, right. Yeah. Well, we like as Josh already said in the beginning of the episode, like we're just scratching the surface of all of the stuff that you've done over your long career. So like it's super amazing to hear all of these stories and your insights on music. But I think we're gonna wrap things up. So Mike, I would like to thank you so much for being here with us and showing your insights and all of your wisdom and these great recordings that we were able to play from you and you as a sideman as well. And this was super fun. This was really a good way of starting 2021 with the podcast.
Yes.
Am I right, Josh?
Absolutely. Yeah, Mike, just fantastic.
Sure. Thank you so much, guys. I've just had a ball, and really interesting hearing a lot of these things I haven't heard in a long time.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
And your comments and insights. It's all really been a lovely experience.
Oh, well, thanks to Holly as well for helping out with some of the selections and for her beautiful playing on that track we heard. And you're a gem. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you, fellas.
And for everybody at home, on January 26th, we'll have a tribute show to Art Pepper. I just got his biography in the mail because we're going to do the tribute of Art Pepper with his widow, Lori Pepper. So that should be really, really interesting. If you would like to support this series, we would appreciate a donation. And you can donate through Venmo. And the handle is at West Coast Jazz Hour. And you can make a donation over there if you would like to. Our thanks again to the great Mike Wofford for joining us. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks again on January 26th with Lori Pepper. So thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thank you so much. See you next time.